Salt Lake Justice Court. I'm the judge here in your city. We are here, it's myself, and I'll introduce you to Kristen Reardon. She's the blonde lady over here, who is our court administrator in the Justice Court. She takes care of everything that happens in the court. And we're the two people that are going to kind of be here running the mock trial program that Mr. Jones talked to you about. I think that you guys have all been talked to about that, and maybe some of you already have parts for the trial that we're going to do throughout the semester. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we are going to be the ones that you see relatively regularly, myself and Kristen, from the court. But today, what we're here to do is, Mr. Jones asked us to come in and teach a few class sessions or present in your classes a couple times throughout the semester. And what we're going to talk about today are the three branches of government, which I think you've already been introduced to through Mr. Jones. It looks like they were vocabulary words for you recently. And then the separation of powers between those branches. And we have some other special guests here for you today to talk about that as well. We have the mayor of South Salt Lake, Shuri Wood, is here. You've probably seen her all over the news a lot. And we also have the council chair of the city council, whose name is Ben Pender. He's here too. So we're going to talk about our separate branches of the government today, the local government, and then kind of the separation of powers and let you guys know what we do and how we got here and how it all works, okay? But to do that first, we're going to start with this Kahoot quiz. Are you guys all ready to go on that? Just to go over those generally again briefly before we get into the local branches of government, I just wanted to review what they were. So we have the judicial branch, which is on the United States level, like on the big level, it's the Supreme Court of the United States. That's kind of the head of the judicial branch of the U.S. government. And who knows then what the head of the legislative branch of the U.S. government is? That works in that building that we saw. Does anybody know what it's called? The United States Congress? Did somebody just say Senate? Okay, it's Congress. And Congress is made up of the Senate and the House of Representatives, okay? So that's the legislative branch of the U.S. government. And then the executive branch of the U.S. government, who knows who the head of that is? Anybody? Exactly, it's the president. It's Donald Trump right now. So it's the president of the United States is the head of the executive branch, all right? Does anybody know what each of those branches does, what their jobs are? Any of the three?
One of them passes laws.
Which one does that? Do you know? Nope. It's the legislative branch, is the branch that passes the laws. They write the laws and they pass the laws. Are you Googling it? Do you know another one?
The executive branch carries out the laws.
That's right. The executive branch is responsible for carrying out the laws. They enforce the laws. So what does the judicial branch do?
He evaluates and interprets the laws.
That's exactly right. They interpret the law. So when we talk about things at the local level, we have those same three branches at the local level. We have the executive branch, which is Mayor Wood and her branch of government. We have the legislative branch, which is Councilman Pender and the city council and his level of government. And then we have the judicial branch, which is the court, and I'm the only member of it. So it's my branch and it's the judicial branch of the government. So Mayor Wood is the head of the executive branch who's responsible for enforcing the laws. Councilman Pender is the legislative branch who's responsible for enacting the laws. And I'm the judicial branch, and I'm responsible for analyzing the laws and evaluating the laws and applying them, okay? So as far as I go, and we're gonna start with me today, and then Councilman Pender and Mayor Wood are gonna tell you the same thing about what they do every day and how they got to where they are. So I'll just tell you how I started and how I became a judge in the first place. So I went to high school and college, obviously, and then I graduated from college and I went to law school, and I became a lawyer. And when I was a lawyer, or when I started as a lawyer, I knew that I wanted to be a prosecutor, which is a person who works up at the DA's office and prosecutes people for committing crimes. So I did that for about 15 years. And then I had a baby last year and decided that I wanted to do something different. So I applied for the job as the judge in South Salt Lake, and Councilman Pender and his people and Mayor Wood and her people were kind enough to hire me, and they appointed me as the judge there. So as the judge in that court, the kinds of cases that I hear, that I listen to, are mostly traffic cases and criminal misdemeanors. So anything from like a speeding ticket up to a case of domestic violence. where someone is charged with, hitting their spouse or something like that. So we hear kind of a wide range of cases, and what my job is when those cases come into my courtroom, I have to listen to the facts of them, and then I have to apply the law. So I have to listen to everything that happened and decide, first of all, whether that person who's accused of committing that crime is guilty of it, whether they did it or not. And then if I do find them guilty, I have to figure out how the law applies to their particular case so that I know how to sentence them. So I know, whether to send them to jail or have them do some probation or just pay a fine. There's a whole range that we can do in there, okay? So that's how my particular job works. Now, before we get to Councilman Pender and Mayor Wood, I wanted just to touch on the issue of the separation of powers. Have any of you ever heard that term before? No? Okay, so the separation of powers is what makes sure that our government runs the way it's supposed to. And what that means is that those three branches have to operate separately from each other. So I don't get to go into Mayor Wood's office and say, hey, I think you need to do this to enforce this law. You're not doing this the way I want you to. You need to enforce the laws in a different way. And Mayor Wood doesn't get to go to Councilman Pender and say, hey, you need to pass this law. I want you to pass this law because this helps me and my family and I want you to do it this way. And Councilman Pender doesn't get to come to me and say, hey, you sentenced someone only to 6 days in jail on this case and you need to sentence them to 50. We can't tell each other what to do, okay? And it works the same way at the national level. The president can't tell Congress what to do, even though sometimes he tries. And Congress can't tell the courts what to do, even though sometimes they try. Those things all have to remain separate to make sure that everything is getting done the way that it should be, and no one is being influenced by anybody else. Does that make sense? All right, so let's have, who wants to go first, Mayor Wood or? All right, Mayor Wood, or go ahead.
Hi, my name is Cherie Wood, and I'm the mayor of South Salt Lake City. I have been the mayor here for 7.5 years now. How I became the mayor is kind of a funny little story. When I was sitting in classes, which I did go to Granite Park Junior High, so I was amongst you guys, I was a grizzly. I never thought that I wanted to be anything in politics when I was your age. I went to Granite High, graduated, started going to the University of Utah, and while I was doing that, I started working for the city of South Salt Lake when I was 19 years old. So you guys turn your tap water on, you get water, your parents have to pay a bill. When they would come pay that bill, they would pay that to me. So that's where I started at the city. When positions would come open, I would apply for them, and if I was qualified, I would get them. But I did realize I hit a certain place where I wasn't going to get any higher without going back to college. At that time, I had 2 sons, so I had a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old and an 18-month-old, and decided that I needed to go back to school. So while I was working full-time at South Salt Lake, I went back to school, and I got my 2 degrees, one in business administration and one in business management. That afforded me the opportunity that when the mayor previous to me, Mayor Gray, took office, he asked me if I wanted to be his chief of staff. And so I thought, yeah, that would be great. I love South Salt Lake, all my institutional knowledge, because at that point in time, I had worked for the city for 16 years. So I thought, yeah, this is a great opportunity. I love South Salt Lake. I want to make it a better city. Little did I know that working that close to the mayor's office, I saw the power that a mayor and a council could impact on their community, and really the good that the changes that they could make in the community. Still had never thought about being mayor. At that point in time, I'm not an elected official as chief of staff, but when Mayor Gray decided not to run, he called me in his office and he said, I've thought a lot about this. You really do the job behind the scenes, and I think that you should run for mayor. And I will tell you, and he will tell you this, I told him, you are crazy, people are mean, and politics suck. And I walked out of his office just like, yeah, never. Took that weekend and really started thinking about not being done with wanting to help the city that my kids were growing up in. I have 3 sons that are growing up in South Salt Lake, and I thought, you know what, there are some things that Mayor Gray started that I'd really like to see continue in our community. I really had a passion for the youth of our community and really wanted to see opportunities open for you guys. And what I mean by that is I felt like when I was growing up in South Salt Lake, because I'm a lifelong resident of South Salt Lake, that I didn't feel like we were necessarily a strong college-going culture for our youth. Like when I was growing up, we never really talked about it unless we talked about it at home. And I have a great family. I'm the oldest of 6, but we really never talked about it. So I thought, you know, I want all of you guys to have an opportunity to know that you can go to college, that you absolutely have every right to go to college, and that we as a community will do everything we can to support you in that role. So I ran and won, and was a little surprised I hadn't had any fundraising classes. I didn't know how to fundraise. I didn't know how to run a campaign. I ordered a campaign manager book off of Amazon. And like me and some of my friends, after work hours, we'd study that and we were like, okay, this will work in South Salt Lake. I don't think this will. And that's kind of what we did, and we just did grassroots, knocking on doors, talking to people. Really wanted to see what the residents' concerns were and see what we could do. What I ended up doing, which I take a lot of care about, is that I felt like I made a lot of promises in people's front rooms about things that I was really going to work on while I was in office. And so I work hard every day to make sure that what I can do at the executive level or the administrative level, I can't change policy. I can work with the council to say, you know what, I really think that this is a policy that we need in our community, but it's ultimately the council that has to vote on that. When they pass an ordinance or a resolution, then it is my job with my employees that work for the city to enact those laws. So 7 years later, I'm up for re-election again. You might see my signs around the city. But I really care about South Salt Lake. I really care about you guys going to college. If you participate in any of the Promise programs, that is one thing that I'm really proud of, an accomplishment with the city council and my administration is the Promise programs in our community. And I'm going to leave it here, but I'll answer any questions when David does.
Okay, and I actually want to say one thing that Mayor Wood just touched on that I did not when I was talking to you guys about the separation of powers. Is that just because we're separate from each other and we can't boss each other around doesn't mean, like Mayor Wood just said, that we can't work together. And in South Salt Lake, everybody does work really, really well together, the mayor and the city council. And if they ever need anything from me, which isn't very often, we work together on that too. But just because you have to not have influence over each other doesn't mean you can't talk and come to good agreements with each other, okay?
So my name is Ben Pender, and I am the City Council chairperson currently for South Salt Lake. I go back a little bit old. I'm a little bit obviously older than Mayor Wood, so I also attended this school. However, it wasn't called Granite Park Junior High. It was called Central Junior High. We were Bruins is what we were at the time. So it's been many years ago. But so this is also a school that I attended growing up. I grew up here in South Salt Lake as well. And my children have grown up here in South Salt Lake and attended all the schools here as well. And actually, as I was walking in, your teacher, Mr. Nelson, was asking me if, pardon me? Jones, sorry. I got Nelson on my mind. Jones told me that, asked me if I had a son named Cody, which I do, and he said, I taught your son many years ago. So my son's now 28 years old and married and has children, and so we kind of come back here as well. As far as the city council goes, you know, I really never had an aspiration to be on the city council, to be quite honest with you, and never really thought that would be a direction I would want to go in my life. So when I graduated from high school over at Granite High School as well, I actually started working and went to the police academy. And after a couple of years of going to the police academy and working a full-time job, I ended up becoming a police officer and actually started here in South Salt Lake for a short time, and then moved over to the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office where I am today. And so politics really weren't on my radar. It was easier for me to deal with what I dealt with over there than what politics looked like. But you know, after being a lifelong resident of South Salt Lake, and it's not that you even have to be a lifelong resident, you start realizing that, you know what, maybe you can make a difference. And that's one of the things I started thinking about. In my full-time assignment as a police officer, I do a lot of for people, and I enjoy that, and I thought this would be something that would go along with that, which it is. And, you know, regardless of your backgrounds, everything always seems to help, and that's what makes the council so unique. So we have 7 city council members. We have 5 districts. So the city of South Salt Lake is broken up into 5 districts. So we have 1 elected official for each of those districts. And then also we have 2 additional, what they call at-large councilmen or women. And they actually represent the entire city. And as the mayor talked about before, the city council, we set policy, ordinances, resolutions, those types of things that we do as a council. But it is very important that you work well together. Sometimes you see even on the national level, when people don't work together, nothing gets done. So it's really important that we, you know, keep those communications open with not only the mayor, but the judge, and not telling them what to do, but meeting and working together on issues so that we can progress the city, you know, of where we reside. So those are the things that are really important. So as being a council chairperson, how that works is every January, the city council actually gets together and they have to decide who's going to be the chairperson. So to me, it's a little bit uncomfortable because it's kind of like a vote, and it's almost like, you know, you kind of feel like it's a popularity contest, or what are they voting on? And they vote, and then if it's a, you know, you have so many votes and the other one and somebody else, then they have to bring it down to 2 people and kind of go that way until the person that has the most votes wins. But as the chairperson, I work directly with the mayor. We meet regularly, which is really helpful because, again, talking about that communication is really important when we meet together, and kind of she understands the direction of the council, we understand the direction of the administration, and kind of helps us work together and do better things for all of us. Also, as the chair, I represent the council, so if there happened to be like a media issue, as you remember, or some of you may remember this homeless resource center that we've been kind of fighting in South Salt Lake over the last year. I was with the mayor. She included me with everything because I represented the council, so we worked on that together as well. There's also a vice chair, so if the chair is not available, the vice chair then would step in and take the chair's role as far as the meetings with the mayor, setting the agenda, making those scheduling, you know, kind of pushing the agenda that the council has. So if the council has interest in certain areas, the chair would take those. When I meet with the mayor and her staff, we get those on the agenda, and I kind of give her an idea of what we're talking about, so she can always make sure she has the proper staff there as well to answer questions that we may have. But you know, I know you're all fairly young in comparison to myself here, but don't rule this out. Like I said, it's always something that you know, you can really make a difference. And I feel like even being in here, I have made a difference. You can represent your community. You can make changes, and every one of you have different backgrounds and things that you can bring to a city. So, you know, and that's what's so unique about like the council is we all come from different backgrounds. We have people that work at the hospital. We have, you know, people in real estate. You know, we have people from all walks of life that are in that council, but that's what makes it so unique and helps us, I really think, you know, have a better outlook on what's going on, is because we don't all have the same people that are on the council there. So again, to me, it's been very rewarding. I've enjoyed it, and we just encourage you, you know, learn about this. This is something I really didn't learn about when I was your age, and I regret it to this day. So you can clearly see because I have some notes here. So thank you for your time, and again, I'm going to stick around as well if you have any questions, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Okay, so I think that kind of gets us through the presentation. Do any of you guys have any questions for any of us? Somebody's got to have a question for somebody.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
If any of you are interested in becoming more involved in the city of South Salt Lake, we do have what we call a youth city council. And that is where you would come do service projects with the city. We have a youth city mayor, we have a youth city recorder, city council members, and you guys function like a mini body of the current city municipal government. So if anybody's interested in that, all the information with Mr. Jones on how you guys can connect with us.
I didn't even know we
They're
had that.
receiving applications right now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that looks really good on your college application, so.
Is it an after-school, like, once-a-month thing, or what is it? As far as-
They're more active than that.
Okay.
so we could even have Edward do as the advisor.
Oh, great, okay, awesome.
Yeah,
I
it'd be
didn't know that
great.
we had that.
So you guys can get involved now, you didn't have to wait till the end.
Okay, anything? No, thank you. Anything? All right, thanks, guys. Thanks for your attention.